So back to figuring out who you should interview. Now, if you really want to make money and be successful and turn your project into a product that other people will buy, then you need to figure out all of the different people or organizations that affect what you're doing. So that would include like the end user, the manufacturing companies, maybe your competitors, other things like that. So we will take a look at, we'll use mine as an example and kind of step through how to do that. That's called an ecosystem map. When you have a map of everybody who affects your project. So we'll start, product developers is us. Okay, so for your project, y'all are the product developers. Now for mine, that's me, and then I'll think about, so who would get my product? But I wouldn't sell it right to an end user. It would have to go to a manufacturer or a distributor. So companies that actually make orthotics and prosthetics. So I'll say this is a product line. Product will be blue. So I send my designs to them. They produce something. So the manufacturer then will produce and give it to the provider for the patient. So that would be like their doctor, their therapist, their nurse. It'll go to one of those like medical companies. And then the provider will give it to the patient. So the patient here is the end user, which will be the stroke survivor. So that is the way the product flows. But then also there has got to be money involved. So the end user does not actually directly pay their therapist for this. They would have to pay an insurance company because this stuff gets approved through insurance. So the insurers, maybe Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance. So money will go from the end users to the insurers, who will hopefully pay the providers. And then the provider will have to give money back to the manufacturer. And then the manufacturer will end up finally paying us. So sometimes also, let's see. So these are all different people who affect what's going on in the actual like making in transactions involving the product. And we also need to see who kind of has an influence on buying the product and what should that product look like. So influence, we'll see, okay, so the stroke victim and their doctor are usually in communication about what does the patient need? What can they do? What do they have problems with? So they talk back and forth. And then the doctor will say, oh, we were going to prescribe you this. And then the survivor might say, well, maybe I'm actually having trouble with this other thing, or yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So then the provider and the manufacturer also need to talk back and forth. They need to argue about, or maybe not argue, but just like, discuss what people need, what price is it going to be, can it be mass produced? What are some easier manufacturing processes, like machining versus casting versus molding versus 3D printing? The easier it is to make something, then the more you can make and the cheaper it'll be. So then the manufacturer and distributor talks to us. They say also things like, how should we design it that makes it easy to make or cheap to make, or, like what materials should you use? For this in particular, like something that is metal should maybe be titanium because that's biocompatible if it's inside. Also, like, there are different grades of things, especially in the medical world, but also for other things, what materials, what manufacturing process, how many, things like that. So they talk to us. But we don't really have much influence on them, because if they don't like our thing, they'll just get it from somebody else. But we also want to talk to providers. So we get input from them. Then we get input from the survivors. So these are the people who are mainly going to be using it. So we want to see what they think, because they're going to care about what it does and also what it looks like, because these people are going to be the ones who are actually using it. Then there's somebody else who has influence on the survivors, and that is the people who take care of them. So a lot of these people don't live on their own. They have their wife or their husband, or they have like, not a babysitter, but like somebody who comes to their house and helps them out. So caretakers. These people are definitely going to have some input. So they talk back and forth because they see the survivors every day. So they are intimately familiar with all of the problems. They sometimes go with them to the doctor's appointments, talk with the providers. One thing that, since a stroke causes brain damage, then also people can have aphasia and be very forgetful or not understand things. And so they rely a lot of times on their caretakers for even the mental part of stuff too. So those people are going to have influence on us. So we're getting information from all of these different groups about what makes a good product. And you can't please everybody, but if you start talking to lots of different people and you hear lots of different people telling you the same thing as a problem, or there's a certain feature that they want, then you can be pretty sure that that one is going to be important. And sometimes insurance companies actually pay caretakers if the caretaker is not the relative, or if you have disability insurance or something like that, it pays out. So then the last thing is sabotage. Now, this happens maybe some of your competitors, or maybe like in my case, the FDA is going to be having to approve the device. So the FDA says no, nobody can buy it. So they affect us. They also affect what can be sold and what can be, let's see, and then insurance too affects what can be sold. So insurance hates paying money, so they will try as hard as possible not to pay stuff. But the FDA controls what insurance can cover. So there's an influence right there. Now we could also put our competitors. Let's see. So my main competitor is called the BioNess. That is the only powered one out there, and it actually works by electrical shocks. It just shocks your hand to open it and shocks it again to close it. So it's certainly not really natural motion. But anyway, so these guys, they are trying to sabotage me, but they are also influenced by the FDA is going to have effects on them too. So this is called the ecosystem map. It's got everything that affects your product development.